There's a lot of things that have to happen to go through the proper process of actually planning the yard, assessing where you are, deciding what you're going to do, going ahead and applying for planning permission. You can't apply for TAMS then until you have the planning permission got, and then you can't start the building until you have the approval got for TAMS. In the middle of all this, you're trying to line up a builder who will be on site to start the work when the grant approval comes through. A year and a half from the 1st of October of 2028 is the 1st of April of 2027. That's very close.
In this episode, I am joined by Pat Moylan, Dairy Advisor, Teagasc Dairy, and Dr. Seamus Kearney, Signpost Climate Advisor, Waterford, who will discuss what the Nitrates Action Programme will mean for farmers and how important it is to put plans in motion now to meet the pending deadlines.
The best Christmas present for, specifically, I suppose, dairy farmers, Deirdre, in the country happened, I suppose, the 8th of December, when the 6th Nitrates Action Plan was signed into law by the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And I suppose 65% of all our milk produced now in the country is farms stocked in derogation territory. On an average, the derogation is worth about 43,000 to the average dairy farmer in derogation. That's about 7,600 farmers in total. So look, I suppose the fact it's renewed for another 3 years, Deirdre, is very good news. We're the only country in the EU now with a derogation to farm over an organic stocking limit of 170 kilos of nitrogen, organic nitrogen per hectare. So a good news story.
Excellent. Now, Pat, in terms of slurry, Teagasc research suggests that our current regulatory values for slurry production are underestimated by up to 21%. How will this proposed shift per cow per week change the standard tank size for, say, a 100 cow herd?
Yes, you're up to now and up to the 1st of October 2028, the slurry storage requirement for a dairy cow is 0.33 of a cubic metre per cow per week. And that is now increasing to 0.4 of a cubic metre per cow per week. So in the case of a 100 cow herd, currently, 528 cubic metres of storage is needed for a 16-week winter in Zone A, which is most of the southeast of Ireland. And that will increase to 640 cubic metres, which is in gallons, about 141,000 gallons odd. So it's a 21% increase in slurry storage required by all farmers before the 1st of October 2028, which, as we'll talk about later on, might sound a long ways away, but when you allow for time for planning, applying for TAMS, building construction, etc., the gap is actually it's not that big at all. So 21% increase in slurry storage.
So the cow numbers is defining, say, the critical time or the theoretical peak. How does this change the math for farmers with, a highly seasonal calving pattern?
So it really is mainly affecting the requirement for dairy washings. So there's two scenarios for dairy farmers. One, where they are storing dairy washings with slurry, which is probably the most common reality on most farmers that I see.
Yeah, that's true.
So as the close period starts on the 1st of October, if a dairy farmer is milking from the 1st of October to say to the middle of December, which is roughly 12 weeks, he or she will be required to have storage for those dairy washings for the period of 11, if not 12 weeks. And I suppose, how do you define the actual, or calculate that volume? So it's the number of cows. For most spring herds, it's going to be the number of cows that are on farm in the month of October. Under the new Nitrates Action Plan, there's 4 options given on the number of cows in the calculation, but it's the highest number of animals that dictates what the actual requirement will be. So as most dairy farms in Ireland are spring calving, it'll be the number of cows on the farm in October, which in most cases will be the maximum number of cows on the farm. And like the slurry storage, the dairy washings requirement is increasing from 0.21 cubic metres per cow per week up to 0.30 cubic metres per cow per week. So for dairy farmers out there, they're going to see a requirement to increase in slurry storage by 21% and approximately the same for dairy washings. In a situation where the dairy farmer has a standalone tank for dairy washings, again, the requirement will be based on the number of cows in October in most cases, without complicating it, by the 0.30 metres cube per week by the minimum period of 31 days, which is 4.4 weeks. So in those scenarios, I suggested a farmer who's storing Dairy washes with slurry could have to have up to 11, 12 weeks, depending on when he dries off. Whereas a farmer who has a standalone dairy washing tank at the back of the collection yard, he can meet the requirement at 4.4 weeks, which is 31 days.
Right, so there's been a lot of inspections recently. I suppose I'm based in Kilkenny, and so are you, and Seamus is based in Waterford. And I suppose what they're picking up on these inspections is there probably isn't enough soiled water storage. So plans will now have to be put in place, especially for the dairy herds going forward.
Yeah, my advice, Deirdre, I think urgently all dairy farmers need to have their farmyard audited. And look, why not
Mm.
contact your local Teagasc advisor to do it? We can call it in a visit. We can measure up the tanks, and most of us are equipped with a simple Excel program to work out the current requirements. But more so importantly, I think everyone now should be planning to meet the new regulations, which are coming in from the 1st of October 2028.
And that's
So they're
not too far away when you think about it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
just doing a quick calculation there. If you allowed a year and a half, which wouldn't be untold from the time you think about this storage to actually have it in place, it could easily be a year and a half. So if you work back a year and a half from the 1st of October 2028, you're actually back to the 1st of April of next year, 2027.
Yeah,
That's
that's
only
correct.
16 months away. So, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And particularly, we can talk about later on if people, obviously, most cases, people will still have to go for planning permission. There are exemptions, which we can talk about later on. But to go through the proper process of actually planning the yard, assessing where you are, deciding what you're going to do, going ahead and applying for planning permission. You can't apply for TAMS then until you have the planning permission got, and then you can't start the building until you have the approval got for TAMS. And now, in the middle of all this, you're trying to line up a builder who will be on site to start the work when the grant approval comes through. So as I said to you, a year and a half from the 1st of October of 2028 is the 1st of April of 2027. And that's very close.
So you need to have, the window isn't that big for the necessary
In
planning,
reality, in reality,
investment, construction, and then to try and get your budget in order. Just going back to the calculations, these pertain just to dairy cows, isn't it? So these change in say, the 0.33 to the
yes,
0.4. They're per dairy cow.
there's no change in all the required slurry storage for the other animals on the farm, for the weanlings
That's,
and the
yeah.
cattle 1, 2 and cattle 2 plus.
Okay.
And the dairy washings figure obviously particulates to dairy farmers. And that's increasing from the 0.21 cubic meters per cow per week up to the new figure of 0.30. And these have all come as a result of a 2-year project, which the Department of Agriculture commissioned Teagasc to do, which using sensors across 100 farms, everything was measured over 2 winters. And look, that was the result of the work carried out by Dr. Patrick Toohey, that the current figures are there a long, long time, even since our times in the RIP scheme, Deirdre,
That's
and
right.
they're greatly out of date. And I think most farmers, with any measurements, know themselves that these tanks are filling up a lot. There's a lot more, I suppose, extraneous water, and cow productions systems have improved a lot in the last 20 years. We have cows freely doing now, 500 to 600 kilos of milk solids. So either way, it's a lot of extra water being used in milking parlours, more hot wash routines in the advent of we've no chlorine anymore in dairy detergents. So these are the real figures.
Great, Pat. So bearing in mind that we have to plan ahead, what financial supports in terms of grants or loans are available to support the farmers through this?
Well, obviously, people think about, first of all, is the TAMS scheme, which is in operation for the last number of years under TAMS 3. So currently, for all farmers out there, there's a 6% grant rate available for slurry storage, whether it be under a tank or under a shed, I should say, or a standalone, like an overground slurry store. So 60% for the slurry storage, and then the shed itself then has a 40% grant rate. In addition to that, then from a taxation point of view, it is possible to write down slurry storage as an accelerated capital allowance over 2 years rather than the normal 7 years, which most accountants would use. And they are the main things that are there. But I suppose the first thing in all that is the farmer has to do his homework, do his audit, get his plan permission prepared, get it lodged, and get it received, and then apply for TAMS and wait for the approval. So that's where the timeline that I mentioned earlier is very important. That really, I think you're allowing a minimum of 1.5 years from the time you think about something until you actually see it in the yard, and that's a minimum. As we know, there can be delays with planning, there can be delays with TAMS approval, so people need to start
Start
thinking about
now.
it.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And then in terms of inspection and verification of all of these things, the compliance with the new storage capacities, that'll be subject to farm inspection as well, won't it?
Yes, absolutely. And obviously, at the moment, to be in derogation, those farmers are required to have the current 16 weeks storage. And then the dairy watches, as I explained earlier, will depend on whether it's been stored separately or stored with slurry. So, we already have the current regulations. Again, I suppose the new regulations are coming in from the 1st of October. So farmers are required to have the new capacities in place by the 1st of October 2028, not start thinking about it on the 1st of October 2028. So, yes, and I said to your local Teagasc advisor can call out to your farm and do a slurry and soil water audit and give you direction before you plan anything.
Fantastic. Now, Seamus, you're going to chat to us about, say, nutrient balance and about fragmented land and milking platform. So can you explain what's happening in terms of the milking platform going forward, Seamus?
Yeah, I suppose one of the changes for the coming year, Deirdre, is that farmers will have to identify when they're doing their BIS payment this year. They'll have to identify their milking platform. So that's any land within 3 kilometres of the milking parlour that's accessible to their dairy cows. So that'll define then their milking platform and their stocking rate in that milking platform will have a knock-on effect in Deirdre on how much slurry they need to move off the milking block onto outside blocks of land that they have.
That's a big change, Seamus, isn't it?
It is, but I suppose in reality, Deirdre, this is happening with a lot of farmers. They're moving the slurry to the outside blocks for silage. Silage is a very hungry block, especially for P and K, a crop for P and K. So like you need about 3,000 gallons plus per acre to replace the K you're taking off it. So a lot of farmers are doing that already anyway. But I suppose you're just putting a regulatory framework in place. And I suppose some farmers now are aware where they move slurry from their farm, maybe to a neighbouring farmer. The farmers will have to also move slurry within their own holding on the department transactional slurry movement system as well. So that's a new one that's going to be facing them. We'll just have to get the small print on that, Deirdre, how exactly that'll work. But again, that's another little bit of work that farmers will have to do. It's really, I suppose, do the paperwork around what they're already doing in most cases.
Okay, so they're just, yeah, brilliant. Can you define then what the outblock is?
Yeah, so I suppose the outblocked in there is any land in that's not within the 3 kilometres of the milking parlour or is not accessible to the dairy cow. So that's the outblock of land. So that's where the slurry will have been moved from the area where the cows are grazing on the milking parlour to the outblocks of land. And like we're talking here, look, especially when you start going over 3.1 cows per hectare on the milking block, we're looking at moving the equivalent of 750 gallons of slurry for every acre around the milking block to the outblocks of land. It can go up to 1,500 gallons per acre from the milk per acre of the milking block ground to move that out to the outblocks if the stocking rate gets that bit higher then as well. So it's a substantial amount of slurry, but already a lot of farmers there are doing this anyway.
Great. And then the nutrient management planning
Yeah, and
piece is still in place, isn't it?
it is, and look, the good news in nutrient balance is it's all about taking into account the amount of meal coming in, the amount of fertilizer coming in, the stocking rate on the farm, what slurry is going out, where it's going out, how it's going out as well, and it's coming up then with a figure of the amount of nitrogen that's actually surplus in the system then per hectare. And the good news, Deirdre, is if farmers are doing their Board B audit, which vast majority of dairy farmers are doing, and they sign up to the Signpost Advisory Programme, there's actually a program called AgNav, which will give the farmer an automatic nutrient balance. And look, the nutrient balance, the lower the nutrient balance is, the target is to get to about 150 of a nutrient balance per hectare. The lower that nutrient balance is, the more efficient use of nitrogen you're making, the less nitrogen is getting away, the less of a loss to your pocket. And that's what it's all about. We're trying to reduce loss off the farm is a loss in the farmer's pocket.
It's good for the farmers actually to see then. It's a management tool. I
It's
mean, you
very
can,
much
you can
a
see what
management
you're
tool.
doing now, but how you can improve going forward.
Absolutely, and it takes into account all the fertilizer that's been used in the farm then as well.
Fantastic. Now, lime. That's another implication going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I suppose there's liming plans already with derogation, but I suppose in the new Nitrates Action Plan, lime has to be accelerated, got out a bit earlier in the programme. So basically, any land that has a requirement of up to 5 tonnes per hectare it needs to go out in the first 2 years after the soil samples are done. And if it's more than 5 tonnes per hectare, up to 5 tonnes per hectare has to go out in the first 2 years. Essentially what we're saying here, Deirdre, is any land that needs lime up to 5 tonnes per hectare needs to get it either this spring or this year, 2026 or 2027. So look, it's not a bad time of year to do it at the minute, but the good news with lime, by getting the lime right, we can actually reduce our chemical nitrogen by up to 55, 60 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year. And with these limits coming down, Deirdre, this lime has to be got right in order to get away with what we're allowed chemical nitrogen-wise.
Brilliant. So follow your nutrient management plan, get your soil sampling done, contact somebody now, whether it's your Teagasc advisor or your private advisor consultant. Get out, get your soil samples done and get your lime out where it's necessary.
And especially where the soils have been taken there during the last year or two, where you already know where the lime requirement is, have a look at the maps now. Weather currently at the minute, before this goes to broadcast, is fairly good. Ideal time, lime gives a return of 7 times the amount of money you spend on it. So it helps retain more cows in the farm.
It's the best element, isn't it?
Lime is magic, Deirdre.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there are river catchments now that have additional requirements, Seamus, isn't that true?
There is, and look, I suppose the other thing too is, if we go back through the years, like the amount of nitrogen allowed to be spread on the irrigation farms has reduced by about 20%, Deirdre, right? Okay. And what's happening now in the new Nitrates Action Plan for the catchments in the Slaney, the Barrow, the Nore, and the Blackwater in Munster, which is a lot of our own regional territory here in Kilkenny, Waterford, those farmers in 2028 are facing another 5% cut in chemical nitrogen use. And that's why we need to get the lime, the P and the K right now, in order for us to be able to manage with that 5% reduction in chemical nitrogen to be sprayed in 2028 as well. So those catchments, so that's the Slaney, the Barrow, the Nore, and the Blackwater and Munster, they're facing a further 5% cut in chemical fertiliser in 2028.
And I believe they're also going to be facing additional, say, buffer zones, requirements for chemical and organic.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
and look, I
that's for another podcast, Seamus.
Completely. And look, I suppose if we look at our own region here, Kilkenny, Waterford, Deirdre, like, look, the Tuesday the 13th is the first day for spreading slurry. But the most important thing when they're spreading the slurry this time of year is, for the month of January, essentially, you need to keep out 10 metres from any open drain or any water source whatsoever. And a lot of these low emission slurry tankers are 7.5 metres. So it's the equivalent of 1.5 times the width of that machine you have at the back of the slurry tanker. It's a fair distance you need to keep away from any water source, especially for from the 13th of January to the end of January.
Great. So, lads, we're also being very proactive in Teagasc in informing farmers about the new rule changes and how they're going to impact the farmers going forward. Can you just tell us a little bit about the webinar that you're going to do?
So next Tuesday night, the 13th of January at 8 o'clock, we're having a webinar there, and there's going to be 3 speakers, myself, Pat Moylan from Teagasc, and I'll deal with the new slurry and soil water regulations, and I'll be using a case study farm to explain all. I'll also mention a bit about the new proposed planning exemptions. We have Thomas Ryan, who's the head of agri-sustainability in Tirlawn, and he will talk about their actions in supporting on-farm action in this area. And then we'll conclude with Dr. Seamus Kearney, Teagasc, on the new fertiliser and nutrient allowances. So that webinar is going out next Tuesday night, the 13th of January at 8 o'clock. You'll be notified by text and by WhatsApp and by the general social medias. And in that hour, we'll attempt to explain, I suppose, in simple language, by using case studies and examples, what the new Nitrates Action Plan means for your farm. So tune in next Tuesday night, the 13th of January at 8 p.m.
That's brilliant. Listen, lads, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I suppose the biggest message here now is to actually plan and take action, isn't it, going forward?
And I suppose on that one as well, Deirdre, look, the good news with plan permission, it lasts for 5 years. And I suppose it's the one thing, look, the milk price is going to be tight this year. It's probably the year you'd probably concur, Pat, to get your ducks in a row, to get the paperwork in place, so at least you're ready to go then when the financial wherewithal is in place then to do the slurry storage in 2027 with the help of God.
You've been listening to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, Signpost to Farm Sustainability. For links, tools and the latest research, head to teagasc.ie and search the Environment Edge. Thanks for listening, and join me, Deirdre Glenn, next time. Take care.